Now, just about everyone has suffered a major setback in their personal or their professional lives. So, how do we pick ourselves up and press on?
It's the resilience thing that we're always talking to kids about, but what about us? Performance coach Andrew May has been thinking about how we can overcome adversity and set ourselves up for the next win, and he joins us now. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I guess it's partly about winning, but it's also largely about surviving.
It is. There was an election in Australia recently, in case anyone missed it, and I think this is what pressed this topic. How do people bounce back from adversity, or how do people go on when they've had a win? And it's interesting, isn't it? Some people bounce back and go, look, this has been a challenge, I'm going to rise, and some people it crushes. So it's a really interesting topic on that ability to bounce back.
Yeah, and people talk about striving and showing true grit, but is that too shallow a way to look at what is often a deep challenge for so many people?
Yeah, we're talking about the coach whisper and some of those constructs before. We'll give a bit more psychology to some of these areas. So resilience is an umbrella term that really has three psychological constructs. So one is grit, which is that perseverance and passion, the work from Angela Duckworth. The other one we look at is hardiness, so the ability to look at meaning and challenge in those demands in life. And the third one, Michael, would be self-efficacy. So how do we look at meaning and how do we back ourselves to get through? So it's an umbrella term, but there's constructs underneath that. And you mentioned the word strive. That's one of my favourite words, from the French word estrave, which means to push through and come back the other side. When you ask someone what you're most proud of, it's not, I won $50 in the lotto, or I won a chook at the local RSL. It's often the challenges that we push through and come out the other side.
So you mentioned before the responses that we might have to an adverse situation. Are they psychology dependent? Does the world break down into the kinds of people who respond badly and the kinds of people who bounce back quickly?
I love your questions, and I prepared for this. So resilience, it's not a trait which was thought about 15, 20 years ago, that, Michael is resilient, Jeffrey's not. He was born with that. Resilience can be trained, which is, for our viewers, a great thing to know that, as we get mature, as we go on in life, we have hardship. So if you're watching this and going through a tough time, if you've got resources to draw on, if you've had challenge before, scar tissue, you tend to get through it better. But you can get through challenging situations. You can learn to be more resilient physically, psychologically. They're even talking about an organisational resilience. Yeah,
no, we'll get to some of the personal setbacks you've experienced in your recent life, but first let's look at bouncing back and some of the facts that are associated with. We can bring that up on our screen if you can talk through some of those key points. And we've got to accept that, bad things happen. Spilt milk and all of that, and you've got to try to ignore as much of that as you can and strive and move on.
Yeah, bad things happen. New South Wales lost 11 out of 12 years, Michael. We had
Thanks for mentioning. I was trying not to think about that.
He was being so resilient this morning, and now he's just deflated.
I heard you when I was
the next panel will help.
Yeah.
But we won Freddie Fittler and the Blues last year. An amazing
Move on.
Okay, Virginia. Love and connection. So love, what I mean on this, first of all, is self-love. So to look at yourself and, go, I may have been through a tough time, but I'm okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because in reflecting on this segment, I was reminded of a moment that I've never forgotten from the movie House of Cards. And there's a moment where a woman goes to a psychologist and says, what if you've done something really, really, really terrible? And the psychologist says, you forgive yourself. And then she says, it's not as if you killed somebody. The problem is the woman believes she's killed somebody. So she walks away and she's crushed. But it was something to say that you forgive yourself. You actually say, that was a stuff up. That was terrible. Take the bit that's yours, own it. I made this mistake, I made that. Apologise if you need to. Then forgive yourself.
And it's such a powerful thing. It is that self-forgiveness, the self-love, and then you will be able to forgive others and love others as well. And the other one we had on that was connection. So one thing we know that when you do have connection, now whether it's a significant other, friends, it could be cycling buddies, sporting buddies, they can support you through the tough times. And especially for men, being able to talk to another mate and share feelings and when you're going through tough times. Because we know research in Australia that the average male over 55 is lucky to have one bloke that they can actually say, hey, I'm not feeling okay. So it's really important to have that connection. The other one we had there was fun and play. I think when we get really down in the trenches, we forget that, there is some colour. Like, look at your beautiful dress today, adding colour and spark. I'm in my Melbourne black.
You're very Melbourne black, very boring.
I'm trying to fit in.
You can borrow this frock whenever you like.
I don't know how to respond to that one. So
just say yes.
Yeah, say yes. And the other one we had on our list there as well is also looking at an optimistic default. And optimism is not, click your heels and go to Kansas, Dorothy. It's looking at, I've been through a tough time, I'm going to learn from this. There is some stuff I can do to move forward. There's other opportunities.
You've mentioned a couple of personal setbacks which you're happy to share with a wider audience, including a cancer diagnosis and a marriage breakup that you've gone through.
Yeah. So look, I've learned a lot from both of those. So I had cancer, I had a melanoma 11 years ago, and I don't remember really the first 3 months of my daughter's life because I was getting treatment. So that was a defining period for me as well. And I think when you've had cancer and you come through, you have a different lens, you know, because you're alive. Whereas my massage therapist at the time when I was in Hobart was diagnosed with a melanoma the day after mine. He passed away in October that year, and that was a moment where I just thought, God, sometimes the dice rolls your way, sometimes it doesn't. So that gave me a lot of perspective.
I'm just going to pause you there. I think the concept of the dice is an interesting one because I do think the world kind of breaks down into those groups, those who can think, well, you know what, it was just bad luck or good luck. And others who, probably because of the way they were brought up, just have a greater sense of this is unfair. I've been dealt an unfair hand.
Yeah.
And getting out from underneath that can be very challenging for some.
And that was one of our other points, the default. If the default is, oh, you know, it's all everyone else's fault,
Yeah.
there's nothing I can do, it's hard to bounce back. But if the default is, what can I focus on? What can I learn from this? It is easy to bounce back.
Then maybe you need to try and change that default if you can and get some help if it's too tricky.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.